We have not heard from you since BlizzCon. Here we go.
I didn't think Zerglings, morphing into orcs would work, but
No, I didn't either.
it's been a privilege working on Zergorks.
Hi, I'm Scott Johnson, the host of the World of Warcraft podcast, The Instance, and
Hi,
today
Scott.
I'm sitting here with Chris Metzen. Chris,
Scott, it's good to see you, man.
good to see you. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good.
Why
it's a
the
crazy
Black
time.
Void?
We're about to launch the War Within and really kick off this
Don't like that
massive
set.
Worldsoul saga, which is a trip because I haven't shipped a video game in 8 or 9 years, so it's kind of wild going through this process again and just kind of feeling that anticipation. Excited to see what people think, and when the product finally gets into people's hands, it's one of my favorite parts of the whole development process.
Well, let me ask you this question, because you reminded me of how long this has been going. I remember firing up the World of Warcraft OG, vanilla
Same.
World of Warcraft, and seeing a trailer that said, celebrating 10 years of Warcraft. And I remember then thinking, you gotta be kidding me, that's insane. That's how long I've been playing these games.
Yeah,
and now
old
we're
as fuck.
20 years on top of that, 30 years total. That has to be a little overwhelming, especially given that you were here for most of that, had a bit of a break, now you're back. Does that weigh on you? Do you feel the heat from the time? Like, how do you feel about how that entire process has gone?
I don't feel kind of heat or like the weight of time, relative to expectation. It's really weird, being a little older, a little wiser. Feels like 100 years ago, feels like 5 minutes ago, all at
True.
the same time. So when I look at this Worldsoul saga, the stuff we're building right now, thankfully there's an immediacy of it all to me. It's just, we live and die by, how good, the things we're sculpting in real time is. Trying to hold it all in your head, the weight of the past, it's kind of beyond me. I can't really wrap my head around like all the history all at once. I mean, there's kids graduating college right now named Jaina and Anduin. It's like, what?
Oh,
I
my
often
interviewer
find
man's
it's not
nervous.
all that helpful to overdwell on,
nervous.
in the course of development. You want to keep it focused on what you're doing at the time. So that's how I try and balance it out. One day I'm sure I'll look back and go, wow. Working on this game again has really given me more of an immediate sense of gratification that just kind of keeps you focused in the moment. And that's generally, where my head is at on a day-to-day basis.
When you mentioned people naming their kids after characters that you created, that you named, and that you developed.
Have any of you named your kids Sylvanas or some shit? I'm not judging you. I'm just asking. Have any of you done that? Any of you got like a... Just checking. You named your daughter the Jailer. My son's called Gul'dan. You guys are full of shit. I called my son Jaraxxus. I would call a pet after a WoW name, for sure.
Developed and saw grow and evolve and everything. Something that's interesting about War Within so far, to me, is we're seeing the gang kind of back together in a much more complete way. So you're seeing Anduin talking to Thrall with Jaina nearby, and Khadgar, my favorite worst wizard of all time, but I love him. He's there. They're all there.
Yeah.
And what that tells me is that we're in for some coming together of a lot of strings, a lot.
Not to be a pause, Andy, but if there's any more proof you need that I would be awful at doing these very polished marketing interviews, it's that question. Because I would never ask that question. Yeah, I need more proof that I would not be suitable for doing these kinds of like really fucking nice and happy, fucking fluff interviews. No.
Lot of stuff that has been out there for 20 years that will finally converge in some meaningful ways. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I'll break it down. When I came back, I'm like, all right, let's go. World of Warcraft. Like, what do we got? What are we making? And they were in, they had already been doing War Within, or what would become, War Within for about 10 months. While I liked what they were building and thought it was a cool next chapter in WoW, in my head, I'm like, for the 20th anniversary of WoW, like...
I can't help but hear this. It's like, oh, right. Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. Yeah, okay.
I want to have a feeling, like whatever the product becomes, I want to have a feeling of pulling all the toys out of the toy box, right? They like older characters, you know, the kind of macro themes that, you know,
I know
the
he
series has
doesn't
been
mean it
about
that
all
way,
these
but
years,
that's how I
Titans,
hear
Old
it.
Gods, Light and Dark. I wanted to feel like the anniversary was capturing, you know, like this kind of mix of all of the core flavors, and ultimately proofing out that there has been this storyline all the way through, that everything kind of converges into this crescendo. And in a very real way, how the War Within was shaping up, they're like, yeah, dude, like there's no way on earth, right? That, you know, that's going to divert the course of Mighty Rivers. There's no way to get that done on top of what we're already in production on.
Interesting.
So that begat this idea of a larger saga. I'm like,
He
okay,
wanted to
well, what if we
change
can
it, but
get
they
there
couldn't do
in
it.
X number of steps?
Interesting.
You know, what if we can build to something just ridiculous, you know, but it might take a couple expansions to do.
Huh.
And somehow folks, you know, bought in on it.
Do you think this means the War Within is going to start in a certain way, and we're going to start seeing more of his influence like mid-expansion leading towards the proper Metzen influence one, Midnight? That's what I'm hearing here. Are you guys with me on that? Is that what you're hearing? Is like, okay, you've got this basis of the War Within you've already been working on for 10 months. I don't like it. It's not going to pay off. We need to change direction. We can't do it now because we've already made. This is the classic problem again.
Yeah. Well, I've had it pretty much confirmed. I've heard this is that the War Within, at least the beginning, was written while Danusa was still around.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now. I mean, this is the first question. Remember when we sat and talked to Ian at BlizzCon after this was announced? The first question I asked him was like, "How are you guys able to steer this ship anymore? Like, are you able to be more agile?" I think I asked him.
How long have they been working on this? It must have been a few years, right?
Well, usually they're doing it 2 years before it comes out, so they've been working on this for a long time. That's still their problem, is they're not nimble.
No, but how can you be? I mean, the development is so big. I don't know if there's...
You can be at the back end, and that's what we tried to say to Ian. Like, you can't... Like, Mop Remix would be the perfect example. You've made this thing, you've had a clear vision of where this is going. It's not going that way, and they fight tooth and nail to bring it back onto original course.
That's stuff they can fix.
That's stuff they can fix. But yes, if the story was already written and stuff. Interesting. This is really interesting. So they've already been making it for a year. He comes in, he assesses it. It's probably shaping up to be just another WoW expansion. Don't like it. Want to change it. Can't really do anything major now, so we need to expand this in order to get onto the correct course. Okay.
Like, whoa, that's wild. Let's go. And so Taryn Gregory and I
Shout outs to
are
Taryn.
principal story developers. So we work together every day, and we
Big
talk
love to
a lot
Taryn.
about, like, we want to involve all these epic characters, but like when they're in the scene, they eat all the oxygen, and they could just go off and solve for X. So it's this balance between including all these mega characters and then finding clever ways to get them out of the way, so that the player has maximum agency and the newer characters we're introducing have space to breathe and live.
It sounds like it is almost an advantage to come to something that had already been started. If you'd come to the end of Dragonflight and started from there, that's a little big. It's a bigger buy. It's like, well, wait a minute, where are we going now? We've been flying. Okay, what does that mean? What do we do? And instead, you were presented with some beginnings, and then you got to decide where those beginnings took you.
And vector it a little bit. The trick to after all these years, creative direction, which even today I don't know that I could do a thesis on. Right, creative direction is as unique as the person doing it and the chemistry of the team that you're working with. But kind of finding that balance again of having strong ideas and kind of saying, like, I want to go this way, right? But the team had already been, kind of constructing this thing. So it's a mix of maximizing kind of the things that they are most passionate about, the ideas that they're kind of dug in on, and finding a way to bend everything towards a singular purpose, but boosting their sense of ownership.
So when you got up on stage at BlizzCon, it was pretty magical for players.
I see where you're going.
I can say that for myself and a lot of people that I know.
We're gonna go this way.
And a lot of fans of the game saw this as a return to something. And I think we're coming off an excellent expansion in Dragonflight. But you got up and did something that surprised everybody, which was we're not doing the normal, here comes the next expansion, here are the features, here's the storyline in its basic way. We are going to do a trilogy of essentially games.
No fucking wonder they won't let me ask him questions.
Bringing,
fucking hell.
you know, tying up some loose ends, but also
Come on, Bethany, make
creating
it
a
happen.
Saga
Get me in the
that
room.
is 3 parts, at least. And setting up really the next 20 years of the game, perhaps. That's very different than what any of you have done up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Did that present unique challenges to the way you wanted to create story, the way you wanted your characters to progress, these sorts of things?
Yeah, it created all sorts of complexities. You know, under the hood a little bit, it's interesting in how when I came back on the team, the development process and even the conceptualizing process, you know, like where does the expansion take place? What are the main themes? What's the focus? Really had become much more democratized, right? And people were, you know, had kind of found their voice in the balance of all the special teams that comprise.
People have a big problem with this. Like, the writer should be one singular person and not listening to input from other people. I feel like that's a really stupid take. Like, it's not too many cooks. Like, if you've got a bunch of talented people, you'll always have Joe Dickhead in the corner who's like, well, why don't we have a fucking spaceship show up, right? And you're just, dude, what are you talking about? We're doing dragons. Why would that happen? You know, you always have that guy. But, like, for the most part, if you've got a lot of talented people and you have, like, a basic, an idea of how you get to A to B, and people are like, well, in fact, you know, we could do this, this, and this. That's actually really helpful when making those things. Yeah, exactly. Like, as long as you haven't got Joe Dickhead in the corner who's just, like, he's just whatever he's read on the back of a cereal box that day, he thinks is the best thing ever, or he watched fucking Breaking Bad yesterday, so he's got this really cool idea that randomly one of them turns into a drug dealer. As long as you haven't got that going on, having everybody have an input, as long as Metzen is like, you can't have a full democracy. At a certain point, you know, this is the guy who's going to go, well, I'm taking that idea. Like, it's the same as I do here, right? I listen to the whole team, and then I'm like, well, okay, I like this, and go that way. I think that's like ideas and contributions are absolutely how you arrive at subtlety and nuance. Unless you've got, I like Chris Metzen. I don't think he's George Martin. Right? And I don't think any of us do. I don't think he's Tolkien. He's not going to, you know what I mean? One of the best story writers of all time, right? That's not the case. So having some input to work together on a combined project is a fine idea.
The World of Warcraft team, you know, they'd really built the vision of Dragonflight together. So as I came back in, woohoo, and you know, there were folks going like, oh wow, how is this going to change our dynamic? You know, in terms of, you know, being a creative director, like, will we still have a voice? Will we still, you know, have stakes in how this all shapes out? So
Robert California, baby.
Like I was saying earlier, kind of learning that again and learning that balance again, and coming in as creative director and be like, no, you know, I'm not here to be, you know, hyper prescriptive with everything as I might have been as a younger dude, but like really listening for the team's instincts. Like, what are they responding to? What do they want to build? What do the artists want to make? What are they imagining in terms of that pure vision? So on top of that, the complexity of, I mean, I don't think this gives up the ghost on anything. Like, we're building 3 of these at a time. This is, yeah, I'll say it. It's insane. It's insane, yeah. Right? On top of the team, you know, over a year ago, having committed to like an 8-week cadence. Yeah. So these folks are, we are moving.
We were right,
so
Chris.
Fast, you know.
Chris, the math checks out on the 8 weeks. We were right. We were right on the math. We nailed it. Yay. High fives for us.
You know, and so the difference here is, you know, guys like Taryn and I have to map out where we're going, like, way ahead of the caravan, which is its own really interesting kind of work, right? You know, checking in with everybody. Does this feel cool? Everybody hip? You know, I want to make sure that we're building things that, you know, not only, again, my instinct feels are cool and fun, but that the team is proud to build and that they feel they have a voice in and, you know, can express themselves through where the story's going, what the ideas are. We're already mapping out, you know, whatever, you know, 13.1 and 13.2 and how they actually play out and connect, and it's wild. But in a way, you get to step back and see a far more cohesive vision and a far more refined idea over time. So, and without,
thank God.
You know, again, without, you know, spilling any beans, it's like, you know, we're already talking about, you know, the next few, you know, post, you know, upwards of like 17. And it's just keeping the conveyor belt going. It's like we're loud and clear. The fans want more content, more regularly.
We are greedy little piglets.
In a way, just staying ahead of that curve and making sure that everything, again, is of purpose and telling this much longer story.
WoW 2, baby.
It's been a blast.
I'm fucking putting 50 subs on it.
Creative on Warcraft.
I owe you
for
6
the past
years.
year and a half has been, how would I put it, over such a long span of time.
Azeroth dies
I
at
wanna
the end
say
of this.
It's
I'm telling
one of
you.
the most nuclear creative phases I've seen. For
I'm
Warcraft.
telling you,
But the
Azeroth
pace is
dies at
wild,
the end of the Worldsoul
right?
saga.
Like, the pace is wild, and it's like I ain't 30 anymore, so we joke around all the time, like, we need to start instituting, company naps in the middle of the afternoon for the old folks.
This is a 6-year project that results in Azeroth dying.
It has been pretty amazing.
That's a great way of thinking about it. Speaking of personal connections to characters and story,
Who's that?
somebody close to you, who I think is a very wise human, once said, online somewhere, that Chris is Anduin in some ways, kind of worn out, beaten up by a straight period of like nonstop work, right? But also on the other end of it, he's a little bit back to being Thrall again. And those two characters represent these two parts of who this person is. How much of these characters moving forward, or even in the past, have represented you where you were in your life? Like some people say, well, the early versions of these characters are they were so metal. Like even Tauren chieftains, they look like, these metal dudes and everything. And now they're aging, right? They're maturing. They're moving on in the world. Like you are, like everyone who's worked on this does. Like, that's time. Do you think that's a fair thing to say, that we'll see these characters change and evolve in the same way that maybe you have, and that they're kind of your avatars?
Yeah, no, I know where you're going. So there's kind of an A and a B there. Like the B, which is easier, is certainly we want to push these characters forward. We want to show some aging. We are currently doing that. But yeah, we talk about that a lot. There are many new characters over the arc of the saga that we don't want to be just one-off. We want them to be, pals and, working together to, solve these big problems.
We should call them the Scions.
But certainly the characters that have been around a while, we're trying to kind of find a way to like capture that age up, not necessarily age out, but like, okay, so in that cinematic at BlizzCon, they went in and put like gray streaks in Thrall's hair. I'm like, oh.
It looked great.
It got me. It's like, whoa. And just Anduin, staring you down. It's like our little boys all grows up. It's.
You feel for him. You're supposed to feel for him, right?
Which was
You're
the point.
supposed to.
Just
We
the
don't
idea
yet.
that these
Well, I
characters
do.
are moving through their own
general audience
continuum,
does not.
and progressing and moving through stuff. Like, what a trip! Looking back from where we started. To the point where these are fairly fully realized characters within this setting, and it's just incredibly satisfying that way to see that progression. And certainly us as storytellers, as people, as we, it's not necessarily, it is certainly getting older, but it's also just experience over time. Big life moments, becoming parents, finding love, finding your career, all these big kind of life, hurdles. It's like, I tell folks all the time, like, don't be afraid to pour yourself into this stuff, even when you're like, oh God, will the people down the hall dig it? Will I be judged? Like, yes, probably. But the answer is you're an artist. Go get it, right? Find your truth. Because often when we're pulling from a place of like deeply personal experience, someone's going to feel that on the other end of the line. As you're playing the game, it's like some of those themes that really matter. Whether you're a writer, quest designer, narrative folks, cinematics, like the game design, like everyone kind of pours themselves into their craft, and the more genuine that is, and I think sometimes the more risk you take, I think you get more genuinely affecting content. I think people feel that. They feel you in it one way or another.
Are you allowed
to
take risks, though,
embedded
with so
in the
many
Worldsoul Saga,
shareholders?
evidenced by different characters that are very pointedly things that I think today, or I'm struggling with today, for sure. But again, I think about it in terms of like as
How
the
risky
team's
can you go?
creative leader. That's not the job as much. I often think the job is like trying to learn to call them out, and challenge them to kind of breathe their own experience into it, as opposed to pouring my own in. So it's a balance.
I assume that's what over time, you have a character. We'll stick with Thrall for a minute. He's, probably the most well-known of the Chris Metzen. Certainly voice him. So
until they find somebody better.
Until they find somebody better. Maybe you'll age out of it. I don't know. We're getting there. But no, that you've breathed enough life into that character and given them enough direction over so much time that I have to think in a lot of cases they start to run on their own gas. And while I'm not asking you to tell me if there's any tragedy coming at all, we're not even suggesting it here.
I have a kill list.
Do you?
I've got like my top 12 characters. Like they're all going.
Oh, that's gonna
Why
be
is
death.
Khadgar at the top of the list? I kid. I love Khadgar.
There's no kill list.
All right, good.
There is a kill list.
But you know what I
Khadgar
mean?
is
You
definitely
might
on the kill
find
list.
yourself going, well, it might be time
100%.
for Character X to take a character dive.
So there's no. I'm kidding. There's no kill list.
Yeah, there is.
necessarily.
Yeah,
but we
fuck.
do talk about it.
Necessarily, yes.
When you start talking about,
They have to kill off some of these
knocking off main
characters,
characters,
especially the ones that are unsalvageable.
It's not a small thing. And usually that is in service to in the general story you're developing. If you really need to,
some of the
punctuate,
characters are just too dead.
Dramatic
They're
stakes,
pure memes
the
at this
easiest
point.
thing
They
to
need to
do
go.
is ask Lucas blow up a planet, or knock off a main character.
Tyrion Fordling, for example.
Tyrion.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I remember that.
I'm still gripping on that one.
Yeah, that was rough.
I think
No
Magni's
pressure,
staying.
though. I'm just saying it was a rough moment.
No pressure.
Magni's
so
staying.
we do talk about it
Khadgar's
from time to
going, for
time,
sure.
But we try and frame it with the greatest gravity possible, and trying to be clear
Anduin
that,
might die.
this franchise has another
You'll
20
give
years.
everything to
It's
try
this
and save
big
Azeroth. I
ongoing
can see
idea,
that.
And losing critical characters is costly. So it's, we talk about it from time to time. I won't tell you we won't lose anybody over the arc of the saga. Those types of moments are all about establishing
Anduin might be
stakes and
promoted
that
to Azeroth too.
engagement from the player ultimately. So,
Does it help populate the Worldsoul saga as a creative place to know that over the last few years, while you were gone for much of it, the team has made a real effort or a priority out of having allied races discovered in the world that players can not only unlock but then be and might prefer over the originals or whatever. Like this additional diversity for choice seems like a really potent way to fill your world with more interesting characterization rather than just, well, it's orcs and humans and a few others.
yeah. I love it. Just old school D&D and all these options on player expression, what kind of what culture you want to be from. I love that kind of stuff. So opening that up, especially like Battle for Azeroth and the inclusion of all these new silhouettes and flavors or whatever, I thought was awesome actually. And even the ones I didn't think I would play, I wound up, I rolled a Volpera
My man.
hunter.
My
And
man!
then I consistently dress him like Robin Hood from the old Disney movie. So it's
My
like
man. Volpera animations, top
actually
tier.
really
Not a
dig
furry.
a lot of the
Hashtag.
flavors that have been added over time. Like it's in my opinion, the water's warm. Everybody in the pool. I think WoW can
Oh, he
stretch
pissed in
and,
the pool.
grow to encapsulate all of these flavors. I think giving players more options, more visual options is awesome. At the end of the day, I think erring on the side of player choice, player agency is the right move. Like why you're playing this game in the first place, right? When
Could you please have told them that before Shadowlands? Oh, Jesus Christ. Could you have made one phone call? Like, why are we taking away player agency and player choice? Like, why are we doing that? Let's not do that. That would be a bad idea. Otherwise, why are we playing this game? Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, man.
you imprint, especially when it's your character, when you imprint on a look or a vibe or like a vision that you connect with, it's like go get it.
So let's bring it full circle to what is imminent, which is the war within. Players have a lot of expectations. Some of it is based on just excitement because there is a 3-part saga coming. They're not used to that. There's a whole new structure to this. So what would you say to players who are pins and needles about this next expansion, the start of the big grand story?
As we were talking about earlier, we've never been in a situation where we've shaped the whole giddy up, all at once. So there's the
Yeah.
adventure component of the War Within, and then there's the max level campaign, and then there's the subsequent patches, and it's all been designed to kind of play out over time. Narrative threads and sinews, kind of linking everything together.
Are you still going to break it up
It's-
into like weekly segments? Because it's wank, dude.
Personally, a little biased, but I think it's off the hook, right? At the end of the day, I would want people to remember it is still only, however, part one of a much you know, a much larger narrative. And I would want people to look at it that way. You know, it's meant to rise and, you know, crescendo with its own max level campaign.
Will I be expected to walk in Quest 1 and yank the sword from the planet?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would say to that, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the sword, the resolution of the sword that we started with at BlizzCon, actually, that's a 13 thing. We're going to build to that, and it's a doozy.
One does not simply yank a sword from Azeroth.
I would even say you are not prepared for that moment, and leave it at that. But it is a 13
Wink,
issue.
wink.
Ultimately,
Wink,
you know, things
wink.
like Xalatath, we've been doing a lot of work to kind of build her up as a very different kind of villain. She is not like a Deathwing type, you know, villain where, you know, just
Illidan's
going to
be Mr. Good Guy.
And like, oh,
Super
crap,
good
you know,
guy.
like, you know, like clearly he's where the storyline ends. She's built in such a way that like we're going to be confronted by her and face her multiple times over the arc of the saga. So it's not going to be this, you know, one and done type like, oh, you know, she's the raid boss.
Yay! Good
you know,
shit.
She's meant to, you know, kind of weave
Good,
in and out
thank
of events
God.
over time. So that's something I would say. But definitely the sword thing sticks in my
Good
head. You
shit.
know, like certain of these themes are built to play out over time. So I hope people are into that.
Expect it, but I'm really happy to have it confirmed because in the back of your head you're like, please don't just turn her into the raid boss.
Kind of, you know, crystallize around like, well, wait a minute, I didn't get the full meal I was expecting in 11.0. It's not built to be that. It's built to be part 1. So buckle up. You know, the ride will be, I hope, insane and insanely fulfilling. Going back to that promise of the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft, like, I want this saga to feel like it is just the perfect crescendo of 20 years of storytelling, you know, as we said at BlizzCon.
Yeah, there is a sense that we are fulfilling something. The 20 years came and will end this November. I guess November's launch, right? Yeah, 20-year anniversary will be this November. Yeah. And there is a feeling, I can tell you from the player
August
side,
is launch.
of really coming to something special. And
It's
I know that
launching in
puts
August.
pressure on the team when players collectively have an idea that they think should happen, and then the team's like, well, we're kind of going a different way. But I don't know that I've felt this much positive feedback in a long time about just where things are headed. And nobody says that about a 20-year-old property usually. Usually we're like,
there's not a lot of precedent we have, right? Like that's the same contiguous project. There's plenty of game series run for 20 years, no question. But like, it is honestly a blessing and a, you know, often sometimes a hindrance. Just trying to, you know, sift through the sheer volume of all of these details. Poor Sean Copeland, right? You know, just trying to keep it all, you know, make it all make sense. But it is also its principal strength. You know, particularly because it's an MMO and a video games, because you've lived these moments. You didn't just passively watch. You didn't just, you know, read a book or watch a movie. You've lived these moments and they matter and there are stakes, you know, so as complex as it is to try and push the world forward without breaking everything that came before, which is its own kind of challenge. It's a very noble challenge, right? It's a privilege to tread water in this complexity of this setting. After all of these years, it's amazing that it's still the same stakes. It's still the same world that you've always known.
well, there's a future I see where you're, you know, reclining in some sort of chair,
with the blanket over my
blanket
knees,
over your
sitting by a
knees,
fire,
keeping you warm, and you're looking back and you're thinking,
telling kids to stay off my
wow.
lawn. I
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
I know.
And they're all in their haptic suits playing whatever version of WoW they have, and looking back at Grandpa's accomplishments, and I think it looks like something to be pretty proud of already. Well, I, for one, could not be more excited about this next expansion and the entirety of the Worldsoul saga, and I think you and your team should be proud, and I wish you guys nothing but luck in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Scott. It was good fun.
Thanks, Chris. That was interesting. Interesting. I am a little concerned that this is going to take some work to get people to buy into giving a shit about the WoW story, even if it's awesome. Even if it's awesome. This is a hard sell to a World of Warcraft audience. It's going to take at least till midnight, I think. I think you're right, Naomi. I think that's absolutely correct. It's going to take a while. It's going to take Well, War Within is not launching with any major gameplay feature. Like, there's delves, okay, but other than that, there's nothing big. There's no dragon flying. There's no war fronts. There's no islands. There's no big Torghast, despite how they turned out. But the big selling points of gameplay, it is all story focused. It's not going to be good. The story in the early War Within zones is decent to really good in places. Like, it's decent to really good. I now kind of feel like we're not going to really see stuff happening in a big way till mid War Within, which I'm kind of excited by, because if War Within, what I've played so far, which I've played through the campaign, was mid to decent, decent to good in places, that's not enough. It's not enough. People aren't going to buy into it at that. So it needs to ramp nicely and interestingly and in a really good way. I think he's tempered it. I agree. I agree with what Brackers has said there. He's like, he's tempered the expectations of release. Is like, that's not what you're getting at release. Like Chris just pointed out and a lot of people have said, is like the start of the War Within was written before he came in. So he shaped that into the way that he needs to go. So if you're not like blown away by the story immediately, I still think people should be very interested in the Hallowfall story. The Hallowfall story is fantastic. Then that's kind of okay. And this is why. And it's going to keep getting better and better. At this point, the War Within and the reception to the Worldsoul Saga is going to highly depend on the word of mouth of people who give it a go. Which kind of reflects back onto what we said yesterday about how I'm coming into it, because I did feel bad about how I treated the Magni cutscene. And so my personal take going into War Within is I am forgetting everything that's happened previously. I'm going to give it a fair shot and objective, and then we'll review, towards the end of the War Within of how that worked out for me. I'm going to forget about wounds and champion. I'm just going to put that to the side. I'm going to, that didn't happen. It's away. If there's a character not here, why did Khadgar keep appearing and disappearing randomly whenever it was convenient? I'm just going to put that to the side, put it over there, see what's going on, and then take it as like fresh characters doing some stuff instead of being sort of bogged down in the memery and comedy and comicalness that has happened to a lot of those characters over the years. That's my only play here. I'm willing to give them a shot for sure to see how it goes. But I think if you come in with that mindset, you probably have a better time. It's like, just forget that every time this person shows up that they turn into a fucking idiot. Do you think WoW would be majorly impacted in terms of player base if they didn't do WoW 2 or similar in 10 years or more? No. No, I think WoW could keep going as it's going forevermore. It will always have players. I actually think they could coast. They will drop, but like they could coast by just sort of regurgitating the same sort of stuff with a different twist going forward. They could do that. I don't think they want to do that. I don't think they want to do that at all. After talking with people like Holly and Ian about what they see in the future, I would be really happy for them to take this 20 fucking year old game and modernize it. And they have an opportunity to do that now. Like I say, I know it's copium. That's why I'll put a 6-year 50 sub Gamba on it. But it makes sense to me that if you were going to revamp this game into a modern version that's running on like 2020 code. And we looked back when we talked about this, about the games that came out the same year as World of Warcraft launched, right, in 2004. And we've come a long way since then, right? So God knows how much of a hindrance running on I know it's been modernized and updated wherever they could, but it's still, on the backbone of that old code in many ways. So, yeah, you look at like GTA San Andreas and shit. If you were going to give it the breath of fresh air and bring it up to a modern state, like this game, let's face facts. WoW's combat's phenomenal, but if you have 30 people on the screen, the game turns into we literally dropped to 1 FPS in the pre-event the other day. Like we tracked it as it dropped. We saw it go from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7. I have probably a more powerful PC than nearly everybody here for the most part. And I'm down to 1 FPS, like, playing the game. Like, that's unacceptable. That's absolutely unacceptable. It wasn't my mods. You can suck at so much jizz trying to find some fucking bullshit around it. It fixed when we turned the graphics down. It fixed when we turned the graphics down to essential. So yeah, there's always some bullshit excuse like it was the mod that did it. No, the graphics were too high, which shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case. Not a flex, dipshit. It's a fucking point. If you've got a mega powerful PC, your game should run pretty much fine in a lot of scenarios, right? If you want to comment like that, you can show you an MMO champion thread where you can go and spend your time. Here it is. Let's link it over here. But the point is, it does need some love, right? It needs a little bit of love. It could do with some updating. It could bring up to the technology we have today and work on a PS5. That would be nice. So if they are going to do it, now would be the opportunity. But we'll hold that in the back. They're going to have to remove some of these characters. Who do you think is unsalvageable in terms of WoW storytelling characters? Who's gone too far with the way they've been treated over the last 4 years? Who can't be saved at this point? Sylvanas is definitely sticking around. There's no way they're not. Sylvanas isn't going anywhere. I think Thrall's pretty much okay. Like, Thrall hasn't been abused that hard. Anduin's a rough one. Anduin's been rough. Thrall can go, but I don't think he's unsalvageable. Magni's rough. Magni is a pure meme. Yeah, Magni's a rough choice. I can come in and try and pretend like I don't feel a certain way when Magni's on the screen, like this guy's just a fucking complete joke. And he's just going to send me on some obscure, stupid mission to do something while banging on about something. Illidan, they're definitely changing into a good guy. What do you do with Jaina? Jaina needs to stop appearing, then disappearing immediately. And what's kind of funny, based on what Chris has set here, that absolutely happens at the very beginning of the War Within. Like, immediately. Jaina rocks up, and then she fucking leaves immediately. And I remember when we were playing through the alpha, and I just started laughing. I was like, this is every single time. Is this fucking character just shows up, Laura Bailey does excellent work, and then she fucking just disappears immediately. I think Tyranda's okay. Her stuff in Dragonflight was pretty good. You remember, these are mostly characters that haven't really done much since Shadowlands, which is why Anduin is received the way he is. Like, Anduin's storyline is actually pretty good in the War Within, but because of the last time we saw him was pretty much in Shadowlands, the memories people have of Anduin is that he's just a little pussy bitch who's always whining and crying in the corner. And I really feel like Hallowfall's story revolves heavily around Anduin. And it's a good story. It's a good story. But according to what I read yesterday on various websites, unless your male characters are rippling with veins and striations and constantly covered in baby oil and bare-chested with swords sticking out of their nipples, then they're probably gay. From what I can tell, this seems to be the general consensus of the ultimate alpha males who are playing World of Warcraft all over the place. It just generally seems to be the consensus that I was seeing across various websites. Is like, unless you're literally crushing apples with your bare hands just for fun, then you're kind of a little bitch. So yeah, no men have ever cried. I don't know if you know this. This is something I learned yesterday. Men don't cry because we are rock solid, ice cold steel every step of the way. That's what we're doing. Facts, yeah, just spitting facts. This is all stuff I learned yesterday. I hate what Asmon has done it. I don't know what Zach's been doing. I'm not interested. Men don't cry. Yeah, exactly. So it's this is a tough sell for a lot of people on the story. I'm gonna give it a fair shot. I'm going to reserve, after this interview though, and this might be part of the marketing scheme, and maybe I've bought into it, but I'm going to reserve my thoughts on where the story's going until probably mid-War Within. Mid to 3/4 of the way through. I want to see what Metzen's involvement's actually done. Because he's probably changed some directions for the start a little bit. But I don't think we're going to see the influence of whatever this long-term vision is for the Worldsoul saga until later on. I have to say, though, I am not in the other camp. I'm excited for a good WoW story that I give a shit about. Before FF14, I didn't believe you could really tell a good RPG story in an MMO because there was so many systems and grinding in the way. Now, obviously, many of us know that is absolutely not true. at all. You could tell a phenomenal story in an MMO setting, an absolutely phenomenal story. So I'll hope. Is this the reverse legendary ring? Why did he tease Illidan and the sword? And they left it in, even after editing. If I was being Mr. Cynical, I would suggest the point of this interview was we know the War Within story doesn't start out massively good, but we're going places, so stick around. If I was Mr. Cynical, that's what I would take away from this interview, is that it's gonna start a little weaker than we would like, which was unavoidable just due to the level of progression we put into the game, and we're gonna ramp up from there. And if that's the case, that's fine. But yeah, it's again tempering expectations, like Brackers said. There's nothing wrong with being cynical. The game deserved it. Oh, absolutely not. No, the game deserves all the cynicism it has. It really does. And I think they're probably somewhat aware. Because I'm curious as to the moment of releasing this. We're very close to release. And you would think that having a Metzen interview would come a little bit earlier for marketing purposes. I know it's early access or whatever, but you know what I'm saying. And it's coming out now. Did you and Zach have a falling out? No? I haven't spoken to Asman in ages. He's been, since the podcast died, I forget the name of it now. No, we haven't really chatted today. He does OTK stuff and all that kind of stuff now. He's not really on his own. Real question is, how long will it keep sucking? First patch? Oh, I want to be clear. The War Within launch does not suck. I've played it. It doesn't suck. The things I didn't like, which I'm going to go back and... I'm going to do what we did with Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2, I was really unhappy with how I played our first iteration of their expansion. I played it like a WoW or FF14 expansion and went back and did it again and had a much better time with a different perspective. I didn't like the first zone because to me it was Zone the Zone. I much preferred the second zone, but it was still dwarf story, which I kind of dismissed out of hand because I couldn't give a shit about the dwarf storytelling because of Magni and everything else we've done in the past. So I was like, whatever. Then we get to Hallowfall, and I was like, okay, this is real shit now. This is massive, and I really loved that zone. I really, really, really loved that zone. I loved everything about it, from the design to the layout to the story that was told there. Didn't care much for the Nerubian zone, which is the final zone. I liked the intro to it, but as we delved deeper into the Nerubian zone, I wasn't a big fan of that zone. It was kind of okay. Not bad, but it was all right. I like the first boss and stuff, the first raid. I'm like, okay. I think, but the problem I had with the War Within campaign when I played through it was that Hallowfall was so overwhelmingly more interesting than everything else that was going on that it kind of made everything else feel bad in comparison. And I really, even though I've played through it, I really don't quite get what's going on with Dancing Voodoo Lady. I'm sure you guys have seen that trailer where she's rat jamming in a cave. I'm still not quite sure what the fuck is going on there with the Dancing Voodoo Lady. And by that point, I was like, but the crystal though, like, yeah, I do think she's going to get nicknamed Raygun now, which is really sad. Do you think they will keep the same setup of quests, large text exposed and go fill the bar? We and Chris talked about this yesterday. They have not revamped the gameplay of the zone stuff at all in a long time. Like, the last major step forwards were Mop and Legion with actual gameplay variety. But Chris had a good point on this. If you change too much in an MMO, a huge amount of people get uncomfortable because MMOs are massive comfy blankets for a lot of people, and they like what they like. And they really like that when they get a quest or whatever, they can instantly recognize what they've got to do. So while you've got players like myself who crave variety and change and play a huge amount of games where I see these things done in a different and interesting way, and I really wish like the game that's 20 years old would adapt to some of these modern styles, I do accept that's probably there's a good chance that is absolutely not the majority of people, and a huge amount of people who play WoW as a hobby and just log in and get on with things actually maybe quite enjoy a simple fill the bar quest, because they see it pop up on their quest log, they know exactly what they need to do, and they just go about doing it, and they're fine with it. I crave more than anything for World of Warcraft to radicalize its outdoor world stuff, especially the campaign questing. Kill 5, pick up 5, kill 10, pick up 10. Bores the fuck out of me. But I've also done it over 1 million times, maybe. Combined all the hours I played World of Warcraft since it launched in 2004, and I was playing the alpha and I was playing the beta all the way back then. I have done that so many times that I crave desperately that they change something or just mix it up a little bit. But I don't know if that's representative, let's say it that way. And a lot of people just prefer to be able to grab the quest and go. Do you think Blizzard could run WoW 1 and 2 just like they do with retail? Yeah, absolutely. When I say they're making WoW 2, I'm not talking about WoW 1 dying in any way, shape, or form, but I would expect if they do it, it will be a separate launcher, it'll be a separate game, all your characters and information will transfer to them. I imagine they would also link them via Battle.net. So they can continue to run WoW Classic, remixes, plunder storms, you know, shit like that. They'd be able to do that, and your information would carry on to, it would, you know, it would be working with that character. So they... You see, this, I think we've had this discussion before with you, Hunter, which is like, they'll never do that. I think that is just insanely stupid. Honestly, I'm not trying to be rude. I just feel like they'll never do that ever. It just feels like a crazy mindset. Like, never say never ever. Never say never. Like, they can continue to run this forever on that one, but like, I don't know, and you don't know. They just talked about 17.0. Right, but that doesn't mean that 17.0 takes place on the original WoW client. That absolutely doesn't mean that. 17.0 could be the next thing. I'm not talking absolutes. They absolutely could do that. Yeah, I think they have a problem. I think the world's getting too big. That's part of the issue. I think from a practicality standpoint, the world is getting too big. It's huge and empty and lifeless everywhere. Outside of the current major city, the world is just empty and lifeless, and phasing isn't saving it. They just have an enormous geographical landmass. It's massive. It's absolutely huge, and it's just nothing there. It's empty, just wasteland all over the game that's just simping around. So I think some... I think also just generally gameplay reasons for making game is hard. Time for housing. They can't put housing into the current engine. That's a great example. How many times have I talked to them about housing? They're like, we can't put it into this current engine in a way that you would like. Guild Wars 2 just added player housing, and it's fucking looking awesome. I haven't played it yet, but it looks awesome from what we've seen. They've just added that into their game. Housing is not overhyped. No way. No way. FF14 would be so much worse without player housing. The amount of stuff it does in its community via the housing system is phenomenal. Phenomenal. It adds a lot of player-created content. It adds so much. It adds so much. It adds phenomenal abilities for players to take things to the next level. I had guild housing 50 years ago, a private server. They could do it, so can Blizz. Not in the way that people need it. If they WoW puts player housing in, it needs to compete with FF and Guild Wars. And what Wildstar did. Wildstar was known for its housing. It was amazing. Gives you a base. Yeah. Guild housing would be good. Yeah, but they can't do it. Like, it just wouldn't work. We'd end up with, like, what Garrisons turned out to be. How does player housing make the world feel more alive? If it's instance. Why would it have to be instance? Star Wars Galaxies didn't instance it. Doesn't have to be instance at all. Like, certainly with modern tech, it does not need to be instance. There are lots of games that have had completely outdoor player housing that you can walk up to. It's absolutely been done before. It's been done before. So, I mean, try and think outside of the box of the current game. Yeah, Once Human is doing it, but they're doing it seasonal to do it. New World did it as well. Yeah, there's lots of ways of doing it. Lots of ways. You would think it would be instance now because that's how the game currently works, right? That's how the game currently works. It's instance right now. FF14 is instance, but shows lots of them. Yeah, so you get a neighborhood. There's lots and lots of ways of doing it. Loads of ways of doing it, which work just fine. Loads of ways. It's good. Let's have the Rust base building. Wow, yeah. Lord of the Rings is just play as cities. You build and join the community. Yep. Wild Stars was great. It was unfortunate the gameplay is. I don't want to go from a 9 to 5 type of game, but rather you log in and have some fun. Dragonfly did some of that improvement. They're sticking... I don't know if you've noticed. They've been really restrained with the War Within. Massively restrained. Like, this is all story stuff. Gameplay-wise, they're happy with what they did in Dragonflight. They're going to continue that. There's very little change. Hero talents are mostly passive. You get delves. You get story modes to do the final boss of the raid. Other than that, they are full focus on trying to get a world built that people give a shit about. Gameplay-wise, they're ultra restrained, certainly to where they've been in the past. Great. No problem with that at all. No problem with that at all. I only did the basic delves, and the easy ones were very easy, and I haven't looked at it since. Yeah, I'm not doing like daily WoW content anymore, so like, yeah. I didn't feel the need to force myself to play every delve update that was going. I knew my friends would. I was like, what am I going to do? Do a YouTube video on every update of delves? Ah, fuck that. No, we'll play them through when they come out. Talking about Echo, the race to world first. Did they look into the raid, etc.? Of course they did. The world first raiders. They've done everything they could do on the raids. They have read every change, every plot change, and all that kind of stuff. I don't get involved in that stuff. I'm not in Echo. The guys will be doing their things. They'll be all right. Players been asking for housing since the 1.4 beta. I said, yeah, it was one of the other ones. Colorable armor. Dyeable armor can't be put into the game currently, right? There's lots of things that, like, would be really fucking cool that other games are doing. FF14 just did double dyeable armor. And people are fucking messing around with it endlessly, right? Dyeable armor doesn't exist in World of Warcraft. There's lots of things that are happening elsewhere that just don't go into the game. So there's so much opportunity for them to revamp something. Even if they make the game look the same, which they could do, right? They could make the game look the same, but built on an engine that actually allows them to do all these kinds of things. Do you see what I'm saying? I think when we say WoW 2, maybe we're over... I think it could do with a separate launch or whatever, but they might just keep it the same. And it just is built on a different engine. I think some feature that would run in the offline mode, like gathering stuff. I don't know about that. I don't know. Some of those things are as old as Wrath. I remember playing Warhammer with dyeable armor. Yeah. For good. Chat bubbles. Chat bubbles are on the way. I fixed it. I fixed the chat bubbles situation. I did it. Can't go wrong. Before WoW 2 is the Overwatch 2. Guild Wars 2 pretty much running on the same engine. Yeah, probably. Like I said, I have to say Metzen being back really has me interested again. Surprisingly so. Yeah, I think it's... I think they did well with this interview to make it clear. I can't have been the only one who had more of an impression that Metzen was involved some way behind the scenes for the War Within from the start. Like, at least listening and paying attention. But seemingly, I mean, he put a date of 10 months. They were already 10 months deep before he came in and started looking around. And poking his little nose in to see what was going on. Keyboard Turner found stuff in the files. Pronouns, dyeable items, the code for a year plus now. They're working on it. They're doing their best. Yeah. But it's really hard. They are working on this stuff all the time. When it's autumn, they're working on it. They're trying to do it. But they... How can I describe this simply? It's a round peg, square hole scenario. Does that make sense? You're trying to bolt it on with duct tape. Because it was never intended to do it in the first place. Does that make more sense as to how the situation is now? Is they're trying to fucking bolt this shit on for something that was never designed to have it, right? You're putting a jet engine inside a Vauxhall Corsa to try and get it squeezed in. Does that... I hope I'm being clear about what I'm talking about with, like, WoW 2 and updating the code and things. I'm not saying it'll come out like an FPS, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? It could look identical to the game now. It's just at the back end, it's much more different. Okay, I hope that's clear, because I think some people are expecting it, like, comes out with fucking shiny Star Citizen graphics or some shit, and we're flying fucking planes around or something. That's not what I'm saying. It could literally look identical, and just have a better back-end structure to support a lot more things. It's like upgrading your motherboard. Everything stays the same. Your desktop looks the same, the whole fucking thing. But you've changed the motherboard, you've changed the processor. Things happen. There you go. Oh yeah, we're gaming on release for sure. Our goal is to get Heroic done. We've got a challenge. Can we do Heroic before Mythic starts? That would be the play. That would be an amazing play. It blows my mind that people are cynical to the point of thinking that devs are doing cash grabs, not trying to make the best game they can. I have never spoken to a dev who was not trying to make the best game possible. Even if it came out badly, they tried to make it possible. Oh, Jesus Christ, Bex. That's brutal. What about Realm First? I don't know. I don't know. Realm First were always fun. I like the Realm First things. The interview feels like Metzen saying in a very diplomatic way that he's changed the course of a lot since coming in, because that was before his kind of shit. Yeah. And you can either look like that cynically, which I think most people will, or you can look at it in a positive way. It's like he came in. It sounds to me like what he saw when he came into the War Within was WoW expansion, the WoW expansion. Kind of same old, same old. Nothing blowing your skirt up, right? And it's like, okay, we're doing the same again. There's 5 zones. We're going to have 4 patches. There'll be a raid. We've got some interesting twists on the old formula. We've got some new trinkets. Maybe there's different enchants going along. So we need to do something here. Very safe. Yeah, and certainly with the way Holly is not averse to risk at all. Like, Holly is very supportive on those kind of ideas. Yeah, I'm leaning towards DK. I am. How is it today? Oh, if you've not played and you are playing tomorrow or you're playing next week, their pre-event lets you cap your character in 30 minutes. It's good shit. I capped 9, I think. 9 characters in the last 2 days, just chilling and shooting the shit. So it's really good. Hey, Ron. I hope Metzen could change the story into some more... The story for WoW is such a hard sell. It's such a fucking hard sell. It's so hard. It's really got to be based on word of mouth. I'm just reminded of my WoW friends that came over to FF14, played for half an hour, bought a boost, and then asked me where the Mythic Plus was. And I'm like, that's not what this game is, right? And that's what happened, right? That's what happened. They came over. They were like, oh, God, there's like some fucking elf yapping at me or whatever. And then bought a boost. And then we're like, are we going raiding or doing stuff? Yeah, right, Hunter? It's a hard sell. It's just a hard sell. And they're fully in on this. And they are hoping that people will give it a chance because of this man. Now, as somebody who didn't play the early Warcrafts and Warcraft 3, they are really hoping that the fact that this man is helming it will allow a lot of people to enjoy the story. I still suspect most people are going to install a fucking leveling add-on, or they're going to ask fucking Gingy or Mirez of where do I use my gun shoes, and click every quest as quickly as fucking possible. And they're not wrong for doing that, because we've done that every time since the Burning Crusade, because if you didn't do that, the game would lag so hard you would be disconnected and be unable to play. And the mission with leveling in World of Warcraft and the campaign was to do it as fast as possible to break away from everybody else so you could actually have quest mobs and things to enjoy. We have been trained since day fucking 0 that the best way to play this game is to go as fast and skip as much as possible to get away from everybody else who is a moron who is reading the story. That's fact. We've done that since literally anybody who was there at the Burning Crusade launch will know how awful the game was if you didn't do that. If a cutscene popped up, you were breaking your escape key. Get me the fuck out of there. get me the fuck out of there as quickly as humanly possible. I don't give a shit how good your facial animations are these days. I just need to get the fuck out of there. So, maybe they're hoping people on alts will play through the story if they hear it was really good from their friends or whatever. I don't know. This is a tough sell. I mean, the way I always got around it is I read every quest in the alphas and the betas, and then I didn't have to bother reading it in the main game. But this time I'm going to give it another go. I am going to be reading the quests. I'm going to come in with fresh eyes. I'm going to pretend I'm going to try and convince myself I don't already hate the dwarf stories. I'm going to try and convince myself. I'm going to try and convince myself that I don't preemptively hate all the dwarf stories and take it as fresh, this new place, what's going on, and see what's happening. I don't think playing the PTR ruins the discovery feeling because I'm still discovering it for the first time. It just happens earlier for me. You need that Man in Black memory wiper. Kind of. Kind of. I mean, you need a little bit of pre-knowledge to understand. You need to know why Anduin looks like a homeless man. You kind of need to know that. Is there anything else you really need to know? You kind of want to know who the Lothars are. You do need to know about Illyria, but they've done that in the pre-patch. They've reminded you who Illyria is. They've done a really good job, actually, of setting Illyria up with them short cutscenes with Khadgar. So even if you didn't know who Illyria was, you kind of had a good update. And they've done the little micro videos, the little anime videos, to bring it up. The origin story of Xal'atath. I think that's a nice to have if you did the Shadow Priest questline, but I don't think it's necessary. Because she's very gradually being introduced, and her power with the Void is also representative, again, in those little anime things. They've kind of chosen who you need to know about and bringing them up to date in those things. Was there a cutscene of the pre-patch to catch people up? Yeah, that's those ones. The old gods? I don't think it matters yet too much. Yeah, the recaps. I think if you've been out of the story since Shadowlands and you didn't touch Dragonflight, what's the most important piece of information you need to know after Dragonflight? That the aspects have their powers back? I think that's it, right? You need to know there's a bad dragon called Iridikron who's currently missing, and that the dragon aspects have their powers back. I think that's all you need to know. Really. Who are the aspects? The dragon leaders. Yeah, Alexstrasza's and things. Yeah.